Um, Welcome everyone to our virtual Flow365 storytelling presentation today. I'm really excited to have you all here to talk about the Flow365 Monitoring Program. And yeah, I'll introduce myself. I guess that's step number one. So my name is Lauren, and I am the River Run Network Program Manager at Watershed Management Group. And so part of what I do is I manage many different volunteers, and particularly what we're talking about today is the Flow365 Monitoring Program. And I'll talk a little bit about the River Run Network, which is kind of our umbrella volunteer group for WMG, and then a little bit about Flow365. But I've got two other presenters with me today. So Barbara, could you unmute and give a little bit of background on who you are and what you do and how you work with me?
Yes, my name is Barbara Wolford. I'm a docent at Watershed Management Group, and I've been involved with the Flow365 activities. I'm a monitor there, and also, as Lauren will show you in a few slides, one of our goals is to not just collect the data, but to analyze it and show how much flow we have in our different creeks. So look, that's where I've been contributing a lot to the data analysis and data processing. Okay.
Yes, thank you, Barbara. She's been an incredible help with really looking at the data and helping me understand what's happening. And so really happy to have you here, Barbara. We also have Cass with us today.
Yes, hello, my name is Cass, and I am the River Run Network intern with Watershed Management Group. As a part of my internship, I've been working a bit with the Flow365 program. I've been analyzing some data, as well as I became a site monitor. So I go out there from time to time, and I will be giving you guys a little bit of insight into my experience as being a Flow365 monitor today.
Awesome. Thank you, Cass. Yes. It's been really great to have Cass as part of the Flow365 monitoring program. Like she said, she's taken over a site. She's also helping me organize all of the photos that you all take. I know there are some Flow365 monitors in the audience today. So Cass is looking at all the photos that you guys are gathering for us and organizing them and in hopes of putting them in a safe place for future use, and looking forward to having her chat with you all today about all that she's done. So first, like I mentioned, I'll jump into a little bit of background on the River Run Network, which is our umbrella program for community engagement and volunteering with Watershed Management Group. So the River Run Network is defined as a community of people working together to restore our heritage of flowing creeks and rivers. We host many different events like cleanups, creek walks, restoration workshops. We tell you all about advocacy opportunities, as well as the Flow365 Community Science Monitoring Program. It looks like, thank you, Cass, for posting the link to the River Run Network in the chat. If you all aren't a part of the River Run Network, it's just really a great opportunity to support what we do around Tucson through those many different events and Flow365. So a little bit of background on the Flow365 monitoring program. We've been collecting data in this program since about 2016. And currently we have about 45 different sites along our creeks with just about 80 community science volunteers throughout the city. So this is, this is a map of the different sites that we have around the city. So there's about 45 of those little blue pinpoints on this map, and we have about 80 monitors. And yeah, so we've been collecting data for, I think that's about 8 years or so. So I'm really excited to talk with you all and tell you some of the stories that we've been finding through this data, and what they tell us, and what we're really seeing through this data about our creeks and rivers and what's happening with them. one of the things too that I want to talk about, there we go. This is just a really fun picture of a group of people at a Flow365 site, learning a little bit about the program. And this program is really unique because of the way that we collect data. Not all of the way that people collect data on Flow is through having volunteers, having people go out to these different areas and take photos, which is what we do. But it's just a really unique way for us to be able to do that, as well as have people around the community who are really passionate about our creeks and rivers help us understand what's happening. And so it really just paints a picture for us that we wouldn't otherwise have without this incredible group of people. And so before we jump into these different stories that we have, I just want to talk a little bit about the way that we collect data and the way that I'm going to present it today. And so we collect data based on what's called a water year. And so a water year is a 12-month period that includes both of our rainy seasons. So we're in monsoon season, technically, right now. I hope you've had rain at some point during this time at your home. We've had a little bit of rain at our living lab, and I've had a little bit of rain at my house. But it doesn't really feel like monsoon season quite yet. So I'm hoping that you guys hopefully have had some rain. But the way that a water year works is it includes our monsoon.
Okay, I think that Lauren has dropped off. Her Wi-Fi's been giving trouble. The water
season
year
and our winter rain season of the previous year that it's named after, and goes to.
Lauren, you're in and out. I'll talk to the slide. Looking at the water year is we don't want to split up one of the rainy seasons. So instead of going January to December, which would split the winter rainy season, we go from October, which is the end of the dry season, to the end of next September, which captures the monsoon season and the winter rains. Lauren, are you there?
I think so. Can everybody hear me?
Yes,
okay,
now.
cool. Yes, awesome. All right, I'm going to keep my video off just to see if that helps keep my internet connection stable. And we'll continue. Thank you, Barbara, for jumping in there. And so, yeah, so currently we are in the 2023 water year, which started on October 1st, 2022, and will end September 30th, 2023. And also a little bit about the different sites that you'll see today and the way that we look at different data. So you'll get a little bit of vocabulary words for you all today. We have different ways that we categorize areas by flow type. And so we have 4 different vocabulary words. We have ephemeral, which is a site that only flows when it rains. Intermittent, which is flow that is supported by rain or snow melt, along with a potential groundwater connection. We have perennial, which is flow year-round with a groundwater connection. And then we have effluent flow, which is wastewater discharge. And you've seen that effluent is very prevalent in the Santa Cruz River, up near the Heritage Project, near Irvington Road, and then along Ina Road as well. If you guys have ever driven over those areas, that's where you'll see quite a bit of flow because of effluent flow release. And so what you're seeing in these graphs is what those areas would look like as far as how many days of flow they have within a water year. And so you can see for perennial and effluent, typically we have lots and lots of flow, or it flows year round, right? And so you can see that
it's about 30.
It's at or above this 30 mark. And go ahead, Barbara.
The flow is 100% of the days of the month. So it's 30, 31, or the down point there is 28 for February. So that shows it's always flowing, and the number of days for the water year of flow would be 365. When we look at the intermittent one, there are some months when it just completely dries up. Okay, there's a lot of flow. It's not flowing just during rainstorms, but you will see as you get into May, it drops down to about 10 days of flow. June and July have no flow. And then in August, it starts to pick up. And in September, it's back up to a full 30. And that's intermittent. It means there's some groundwater contributing to the flow as well as the precipitation. The ephemeral, on the other hand, is the one where it's almost entirely dependent on precipitation, and that will have a number of days of flow in the very wet months. But as you see at the start from last winter, it was fairly dry, and you only had less than 10 days of flow in a month, mostly less than 5. But then when we got into last year's monsoon, which was very good, July 22 to September 22, we had almost, we had very heavy flow from those 3 months. So that's what ephemeral means. It comes and goes with the rain clouds.
Awesome. Thank you, Barbara. That was a great explanation. And so those are the different flows that you'll see today. And so we'll talk a little bit about what those areas look like and jump into the different stories that they tell us. So this first area that I want to talk about is along the lower Sabino Creek. And you can see from these 3 photos, it's a beautiful area. And it's been perennial or has had year-round flow since we started monitoring this area in 2016. And so this particular area in Lower Sabino Creek is privately owned by a variety of landowners as well as an HOA. So I wanted to know too, we've done a few events in this area. It's called West Miller Park. Has anyone been there with us on some of our creek walks? Yeah, Barbara's raising her hand. Barbara's been there. You're welcome to put that in the chat or raise your hand. I just wanted to know. Awesome. Yeah, Carol's been there. Cool. It's a beautiful area, and I think we hope to do at least one event every year. So maybe we'll plan that for an upcoming month that we'll go to Sabino Creek to show you all this beautiful flow. But awesome. I'm glad to see that some of you all have been here. So this area is definitely used and preserved by the community that surrounds it. And so we've been able to partner with the HOA that's in the area and the private landowners to really be able to capture this data since the start of our program. And we are just so happy to have this partnership because we've been able to really consistently collect data and understand that this has had flow year round. Since at least 2016. But this restored perennial flow is likely to have resulted from a reduction in groundwater pumping. Just upstream of this area was a horse ranch owned by the U of A, and horses take lots of water for sure. And so I think that area has stopped pumping groundwater. And I'm not even sure that horse ranch is active right now. And so we started to really see that and start to capture this data in 2016. And so that's what we believe to be the reason why we're seeing this groundwater connection, this perennial flow come back. Now, keep in mind, this area is only flowing for about a quarter mile. During our rain
Yeah, this area is flowing for a quarter mile, and there are some springs in this location, springs within the stream bed, and this ensures that the creek continues to flow even when the upstream
Rainy seasons,
surface
though, it
dries up.
definitely reaches creek and
Lauren?
hello, I am so sorry about this. All right, are we back? Can everybody hear me?
Yes.
Okay. All righty.
We were last able to hear you when you were mentioning that it flows for about a quarter mile.
Yeah, okay. Thank you. My apologies all. I was worried about my Wi-Fi connection a little bit, but I didn't think it was gonna knock me off so many times today. But I'm glad that you all can hear me, and thank you to Barbara and Cass for being here to help continue this presentation as needed. So yeah, we this area typically flows perennially for about a quarter mile, but it does eventually connect to the Tankerverde Creek downstream, especially when we have that rain input and when the flow is stronger and can connect to the Tankerverde Creek downstream. One of the other really interesting things about this area is that we have documented the presence of what's called a rheocrene, I think is how you say that, a particular type of spring that is in this area. That the rheocrene definition is that particular type of spring is found within a stream bed. And so we've been able to document a spring, which is where groundwater is coming up to the surface in this area. And that's another reason why we're continuing to see flow in this area, is because we have a groundwater connection from this spring. And so this is what the graph for this area looks like, particularly for the 2022 water year, which was last year. And so you can see, like Barbara was mentioning with perennial flow sites, you can see that we have 365 days of flow, and it just fluctuates based on what we can see and how many days are in a month. And then we've got our February dip right here because that has less than 30 days. And you are welcome to post any questions that you have about these different areas in the chat. Happy to answer them. But I will jump into Tankerverde Creek. So this area, it holds a special place in my heart just because it's so beautiful, and it's a space where we have continued to see restoration, and we are currently working on removing Arunda, which is an invasive species in this area. And so it's just really awesome to be able to remove invasive species and really have a connection to this area and really see flow return. So this particular area, just west of Wentworth Road along the Tankerverde Creek, has what we consider intermittent flows. And so I'll show you that graph in a little bit of what that actually looks like. But I've got a few numbers up here on the screen. So as far as consecutive days of flow versus total days of flow, and that's part of what we report to you all in some of our annual reports that we do for the Flow365 program. Consecutive days of flow just means that this flowed for this number of days in a row. And then we do add up the total days for each water year. And so in 2021, we had a total of 70 consecutive days of flow. And in 2022, we had a total of 276 days. But between those two water years, we had 288 days of consecutive flow, which is really, really, really close to 365 days. And that's something that I like to really think about, because that's less than 100 days away from being perennial. And so this area has seen incredible restoration, particularly what we know about this area. Oh, and I wanted to ask if anybody has seen our recent videos about the Tanque Verde. Anybody follow us on social media? You can raise your hands again or put that in the chat. Hopefully some of you have. But so we have been following this Tanque Verde Scott flow for quite a while now, and you can see that I have the number on here for this water year. So this area started flowing, and I'll give a little background on that in a bit, but we've seen at least 193 days of consecutive flow on here. Thank you, Cass, for throwing that link in the chat. 193 days of consecutive flow just in this water year, and so it has dried up. Currently it's dry. I have not checked today whether or not we've seen any flow, but hopefully once the monsoons begin and really start to rain in that area, we will see that flow return. And so in this area, the nearby golf course that was pumping groundwater switched to reclaimed water in about 2005. And so since the aquifer in this area has been able to kind of steadily recover, we have seen seasonal flows emerge. And so seasonal and intermittent are interchangeable words. And so we've seen flow with a connection to groundwater in this area start to emerge. We at WMG started to see and started to collect data on this area in 2019. Sorry, we have observed seasonal flows in this area since 2019, when a property owner in this area told us about it. And so she became a Flow365 monitor and was letting us know that this area was flowing, and she'd seen it flow for a long time. And so she started to be part of the Flow365 program and started collecting data. And so I've mentioned what we've seen for the 2021 and 2022 water years. So for 2023, we actually saw this area dry up in December of 2022. And so it actually started flowing once again on, I believe the date is January 4th. I have that written in here somewhere. And it just stopped not too long ago. I think 2 weeks ago, there was just ponding left in the area. And it lasted and now it's currently dry. And so we've seen 193 days of consecutive flow for 2023, which is still an incredible number. And we are definitely seeing that still reaching toward perennial flow. And so I'm really hopeful that we'll continue to see an increase in flow days in this area. And we'll definitely keep you updated on our email lists and social media. And of course, with our Flow365 monitors. Shout out to Heidi. I did see she was on here earlier. She's one of our Flow365 monitors at this site. And so I wanted oh, there we go. There is our graph. And so this is how many flow days we've seen in the 2022 water year. So like Barbara was mentioning, as far as intermittent flow goes, you can see that it has quite a bit of flow during, well, we have rain in our rainy seasons, in our monsoon season and things like that. And then it does continue throughout until kind of hit our more warmer seasons when we haven't had rain for a while typically. And so you can see that it does drop down in May, no flow in June and July, but it does pick back up with an influx of precipitation and continues on to have flow in the area with a groundwater connection. And so I wanted to talk a little bit about what groundwater connection means. And so what groundwater is it's just water that's below the surface, right? And so it's really interesting to have, and I really am happy to have this graphic to really talk about this because it really paints a good picture, excuse me, of what's happening in this area as far as groundwater connection goes. And so as we are pumping groundwater with wells that you can see, we've got a depiction of that here. We are taking water out of an aquifer or out of that groundwater supply. And so that water is going down. And what happens eventually is our plants aren't able to reach that water. And we have to dig deeper and deeper wells. And so what we're seeing in this area is recharge of that groundwater. So that groundwater level is coming back up in this area. So it's connecting to the surface and we're able to see surface flow based on that groundwater connection that's happening in this area. I did see one question come in. We don't have the Santa Cruz at Star Pass location in this presentation, but I do just want to read Hannah's comment and maybe we can talk a little bit about it. So she's asking if we have any information on the Santa Cruz at Star Pass. There used to be constant effluent flow, but there's not been for many months now. There was a little habitat of bullfrogs, small fish and birds, but it's all really dried up. You know who manages this effluent flow and why they've stopped it? Good question. So I'm not entirely sure. I will definitely be looking into that, Hannah. I have seen your reports that it is that they've decreased the amount of water that's coming out of that area. And I think part of that is due to we're coming into the monsoon season, right? And so effluent flow is something that is monitored and water that's treated and released into these systems. And as well, during monsoon seasons, we have a lot of water coming through our systems. And so having effluent flow along with our rain and our monsoon flows coming through, that can definitely be a lot of water. So I could see why that area has been, the water is turned off or decreased. But I think that area is managed by Tucson Water or Pima County. If anybody else knows in here, I'd love to have you answer that. But like I said, Hannah, I can do a little bit of research for you. Now that I think about it, I think it is Pima County, but you can definitely get that answered. Yes. Yes, Alexander. That area in particular is the Santa Cruz River Heritage Project site that Hannah is mentioning. That is where that flow is coming from. Mm-hmm. Awesome. Good questions, you guys. I'm going to jump back to talking about this, the Rito at Craycroft Road. So this site is kind of the confluence of where the Tanqueray Creek and the Pantano meet together to form the Rito. And one of the things that we know about this area is that it's considered a shallow groundwater area, which means that water is within about 50 feet of the surface. So groundwater is within 50 feet of the surface. And so you can see from the numbers that we have here that there was a decrease of flow days, in the 2022 water year versus the 2021 water year. So you can see we went from 56 days of consecutive flow in 2021 to only 27 in 2022. But we are
I think that the presentation just fell off again on Lauren's end. Let me see.
I can bring it up
Okay.
and get us down to where we were, Rito.
Mhm. At Craycroft, yes.
No, that's too far. Rito. Craycroft, yes. Podium. Okay, I think Lauren had pretty much talked about the number of consecutive days here at Rito at Craycroft. Incidentally, this is the site near Fort Lowell, and the reason Fort Lowell was located where it was is because this is a place where you have both Tanque Verde and Pantano feeding into it. So back in the day, there was water just about year round there. You can see that now it is definitely intermittent, but there are stretches of consecutive days that are fairly lengthy. Cass, do you have the number for how many consecutive days we had this spring?
I'm not sure. Yeah, I don't have access to that number for at least not
Okay.
at Rito.
That was like 150 or on that order, but maybe not. Anyway, it was really long.
we had 107 days of flow in this
Thank you.
area.
Okay.
I apologize again. I'm not.
Why don't you let me share my screen and you just talk, Lauren?
Sounds great. Thank you, Barbara.
And just say go when you want me to change.
Will do. All right. Thank you for taking that over. And yeah, we saw 107 days of consecutive flow along that area. It was really exciting. And we look forward to see what happens with this monsoon season and into our winter rains this year as well. And we are jumping to another site that you can see on the screen, which is a beautiful area along Agua Caliente Creek at Milagrosa Lane. This particular area is surrounded by private property, but we are partnering with those landowners still to be able to get the data we collect from here. Excuse me. And this area is the most upstream site that we have along Agua Caliente Creek. And so it's really interesting to see what types of flow we have, because you can see that the mountains are so close to this site in the background. It's just a beautiful area to be at. And so this flow starts kind of in that Agua Caliente Canyon that you see in the background, and it flows all the way down and eventually connects to the Tanque Verde Creek. So this also, this water flows into the Tanque Verde Creek eventually and helping that continue to flow as well. So the 2022 water year, which was this past water year, is the first year that we really had consistent data in this area to be able to kind of talk about it and really understand what's happening. The site's definitely really difficult to get to sometimes. I just mentioned that it's surrounded by private property. But we have this area thought to be ephemeral, which means that it's only flowing with rainfall or snowmelt input. And what's really interesting that we saw in this year was that it flowed for almost the same amount of days that the Rito at Craycroft did. It flowed for 100 days consecutively, starting in January, that ended in April. And so we don't really know a whole lot about this site. That's kind of what we're learning. And part of the reason why this Flow365 monitoring program is so important is because we want to know what's happening in here. And so previously we definitely were under the impression that this area is ephemeral or only flowing with rainfall. And part of what we're seeing here, however, is that there's potential for this area to be intermittent, especially with the amount of flow days that we saw here in 2023. So I'm really excited to have monitors continue in this area and continue to collect data so that we can understand this site more. You can go ahead, Barbara. And so you can see the 2022 water year, what happened there. And so you can see it's very ephemeral as far as what we were able to capture in 2022. It's really only flowing with rainfall input in January and February, and then it went dry. And we have August and then a teeny bit in September of 2022, right before the water year ended. And so it's just really interesting to be able to compare that data to what was collected in 2023. So I'll hope to update you all on what's happening at Agua Caliente Creek and Milagrosa Lane for the 2023 water year and see how it changed. You can go to the next slide. Thank you. So this is an area that many of you maybe drive over. It's just, this is just north of a bridge off of the Pantano Creek and Tancaverde Road, which is only really flowing with rainfall input as well. And you can see how urbanized this area is. You can see the concrete lined banks, the grade control structure in the photo, that's just a concrete section of creek bed to kind of help it stay elevated and not begin to sink down. And this is what's really interesting about this area is that it's the last site that we have before the Pantano and the Tancaverde merge. And so it's really interesting to be able to document and have volunteers tell us how much water we're getting from the Pantano Creek and how much water we're receiving from the Tancaverde Creek that flows into the Rito. Because what Barbara was mentioning earlier about the history of the confluence where the Tancaverde Creek and the Pantano Creek meet is that it was flowing pretty much year round. And that was because of the different times of year where the Tancaverde would be flowing and the Pantano Creek would be flowing. And so it's really interesting to see and to have data on this particular area where we know that this is ephemeral or really only flowing with rainfall, and watching the Tancaverde have so much more flow than this area. And so what we know currently is that most of the flow going into the Rito is from the Tancaverde, but you can see that we still have 61 days of flow along the Pantano Creek in this area, with 2 weeks total of consecutive days of flow, at least in the 2022 water year. We don't currently have any 2023 stats for this particular area, but we are excited to see what happens here and just really understand the Pantano Creek. I think it's something of a mystery still to us, but we've got probably a total of about 20 people monitoring along the Pantano Creek in the program right now, and along its tributaries like Rincon Creek, and we have a monitor along Cienega Creek as well, who's collecting data in that area. And so we're really excited to see and understand what's happening in the future for here too. You can go to the next. Oh, yes, sorry, Barbara. So this is what we're seeing, excuse me, as far as the water year graph and flow days in graph form for this area for the 2022 water year. And so you can see it is very ephemeral, only really flowing a teensy bit with rainfall, input. But we do have almost 30 days of flow in August from our monsoon season in 2022. Thank you, Barbara. Awesome. And we also have volunteers who collect data along the Cañada del Oro. And so this is one of those particular sites at First Avenue. It's a really beautiful area along the loop. It's got lots of vegetation. And you can see the beautiful, I think those are the Tucson Mountains in the background. Don't quote me on that. I'm not very good at what the mountains are. I'm learning. This area is very heavily monitored. We have about 6 people who monitor here on a weekly basis. And so we've got a lot of data to go by. And even with that incredible amount of data, you can see that this area is very ephemeral. About 16 days of flow in total for the 2022 water year, and only 4 days of consecutive flow in this area. And so what that's really telling us is that there's a lot of different factors that could be here. We just might not be getting a whole lot of rain in this area, but I think we get quite a bit. And so one of the things that we know about the Cañada del Oro is it's really big. It's very spread out. And upstream of this is actually Catalina State Park. And as flow is able to spread out and slow down, it's also able to sink into the ground. And so even though we are only seeing about 16 days of flow in this area, we are currently collecting data at a site that's a few miles upstream of this area where like I said, we're still collecting data, and hopefully we'll be able to share that for the 2023 water year report that we have coming out probably in the next 6 months or so to really tell us what's happening there. But yeah, and so I think what we're seeing here, even though we don't have a whole lot of flow, and historically this area was considered intermittent. And so it was never, we don't have reports of it being perennial. And so if you have any historical information, there's not a whole lot of it for the Cañada del Oro River generally, but if you have any information on that, I'd love to hear about it. It's a really interesting area for me. And so it was really only flowing for a short time generally anyway. And so I think this is very typical for the Cañada del Oro at this area. And we're hoping to share more data and more stories about this area in the future. And so you can see it's very ephemeral, like this graph. Consistently less than 10 days of flow per month. Sorry.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right. Hello, everyone. I will be taking over right here. So as I mentioned earlier, my name is Cass, and I am the River Run Network intern with Watershed Management Group. As a part of this internship, I became a Flow365 monitor, which is a pretty simple process that only takes a few steps before you can get into the actual data collection. So first, I attended a 2-hour virtual training event where I was asked to choose a monitoring site close to where I live, or you can really go with whatever preference you have. If it's along a certain route that you like to go, a certain hiking trail, I chose one that is on my route home. Because the site I chose is along my typical driving route, I can quickly stop by on my way home whenever I would like to collect data regularly. After choosing this site, I actually met Lauren there, where she then showed me how to use the Survey 123 app to record data for the Flow365 survey. And so if we can go ahead and skip to the screenshots on the sides. There we go. One more. Perfect. As you can see in these screenshots from Survey 123, data collection for the Flow365 survey is pretty straightforward. The survey on the screen is an example of what I would fill out for my collection site, which you can see some of my information in there. For the information that I need to manually input, I provide my name, the name of the river and station that I'm collecting data for, my coordinates, which are taken by the app for me, as well as the flow status, which is recorded on a scale from 0 to 6. If I'm collecting data when there is flow present in the river, I will be asked to report on the water quality and the amount of time that I believe that the water has been flowing. And to finish up with the survey, I will then take a photo. As you can see on this slide, this is an example of one of the photos I've taken. I will take the photo of the site and submit it to the survey. You can go ahead and switch slides to the next one. Thank you. So being a Flow365 monitor has really allowed me to feel more connected to my local stream shed and feel more involved with Tucson's water as a whole. It's very rewarding to know that I'm contributing to important data collection that allows us to monitor water flow in our city, especially considering that water is such a valuable resource being in the desert. And if you would like to become a Flow365 monitor, we will be holding a monitor training event on August 29th. And you can sign up for this training by visiting the link on this slide, or I am about to paste a more direct link to that in the chat. And thank you all for listening.
Thank you, Cass.
Excellent.
I know we've got just about 9 minutes left, but I wanted to talk a little bit about what all of this data means for our creeks and rivers and what this program is really helping us understand. One of the things that I've learned through working with Watershed Management Group is that much of our community thinks that our creeks and rivers are dry, except for during monsoon season, and then they're flooding, and then they're dry again. And so it's really interesting to be managing this program and really hearing stories from our Flow365 monitors that that's not always what's happening in our rivers. Some of them are flowing year round. Some of them are flowing for much longer than we think they are. And so what I really see coming from these stories, coming from the data that we're collecting, is that there's hope. There's hope for our creeks and rivers, that they're not always just dry, sandy spaces that you see when you drive over a bridge. They can be spaces where we can swim. They can be spaces where we're able to enjoy flow and enjoy seeing wildlife. And all of these areas flow at least a little bit at some point throughout the year. And so I look forward to continuing to tell people like you all about the data that we're collecting through this program, the data that some of you all are collecting, to really share and spread this message of hope, because there is hope for our creeks and rivers. And as we continue to work toward the River Run Network's 50-year vision of seeing our creeks and rivers flow again, I'm really excited to share this data that really tells us that that's possible. And we're seeing it happen in real time, which is a really, really incredible thing to be able to collect data on and to be able to share in spaces like this. And so, yeah, thank you. We have a few minutes for questions from you all.
Can I just say something? It's not a question. One thing I have come to appreciate learning more about all of these rivers is how important they are for our wildlife and also our vegetation, that they the even intermittent streams, you saw the picture of Piñata del Oro, how green it was around there. So you know the water is not all running downhill. It's all, some of it is soaking into the ground, and increasing the flow is only going to improve our environment by bringing in more trees, more insects and birds and animals. It's going to be a much richer environment as the water comes back.
Thank you, Barbara. Well, let us know if you guys have any questions. You're welcome to unmute, or you can put them in the chat. Or any comments as well.
So I see that Chris asked about if we have a map of the monitoring locations for Flow365. I provided a link to the Flow365 website that we have. I'll have to ask Lauren if we have an actual map of them listed out for you, but there's a little bit more information for you.
I can grab that link for you, Chris. And Heidi, did you have a question?
Let's see. I just had a comment that what Barbara was just saying about the richness of the environment. I monitor the Tanque Verde Bosque area, which is what a lot, and the incredible plant life and wildflowers. And it's a bird. There's a lot of bird watchers down there because there's just so much biodiversity. It's just it's a magical spot. But that moisture, the wildflower. If you're a plant geek, that's a great place to go.
It definitely is. Thank you, Heidi.
Lauren, can you hear me?
Yes.
Hey, this is Alexander. This is kind of just a curiosity question. Does WMG have any sort of like targets for each of these river streams? Say something like in the year 2050, we'd like to see year after year, 250 days of consecutive flow in Tanque Verde River. So that's part one, and then I'm guessing the second part is, are there any sort of predictions or expectations with that tie increasing aquifer levels, say in the Tanque Verde area, with expected number of days of flow per year? And I'll just leave it there, I guess. Thank you.
Thank you, Alexander. That's a great question. A great couple of questions. We have the first short answer to your first question is yes. And then the short answer to your second question is no. But one of the things we do have is I believe we call it a strategic plan for our 50-year vision for the River Run Network. And it kind of goes into those details about restoration and about what we're looking for as far as flow extent and restoration and things like that. I'm going to see if I can find that on our website and share it with you.
I just put a 50-year vision link in the group chat.
Yeah, there is, that might have it on there. What I'm looking for too, there is there's like a PDF version of our 50-year strategic plan that has all of that information. 50-year vision. So I don't know if that fully answers your question, but I can definitely, I'm not finding it when I do a search. But yeah, the link that Cash shared will tell you a little bit about that and kind of our goals and what we want to see in 50 years for those areas. Oh, actually, yes, it does. Okay. So yeah, it does break it down into years and some of our goals for that area down below the graphics that you see on that page. So yeah, there's a little bit more information there. Good question, Alexander. Thank you.
I believe I found the PDF document that you were talking about with the strategic plan, and I sent that in the chat as well.
Perfect.
Awesome. Thank you. And thank you all for this update.
Thank you.
Lauren, there was a question.
It
from
is 1
Carol
o'clock.
Bauer.
Oh yeah. Good question, Carol. So Carol is one of our Flow365 monitors, and she monitors at a site that's I'd have to look at the data from this year, but I think it's probably pretty intermittent at this point. It was flowing for quite a while during this this rainy season that we had this year. And so her question is, how often do we need to monitor during dry months as a Flow365 monitor? The goal for all monitors is to monitor at least once a month, if not once a week. And so even during dry months, one of the things that we're realizing is the more data, the better. And so even if it is dry, one of the things that we ask our volunteers to do is go out as often as they can, even if it's warm. And so they do so much for us. They go out in the heat during these 110-degree days to go out and take data for us. And so I would definitely say as often as you can yeah.
And Lauren, may I just make another point in here? I mentioned I
Sure.
do a lot of the data analysis. And as Lauren said, we really hope for at least a minimum of one day a month. But if you think about it, getting from an occasional observation to how many days of consecutive flow and how many days of flow a year, well, you need flow data for every single day. So when a monitor has not been able to provide data for that day, we have some algorithms for filling in the data, and it varies between the perennial, the intermittent, and the ephemeral. But still, we're estimating. We're not really knowing. So in that sense, the more data you have, and especially if it's at a time like this when things are starting to flow and then stopping flowing, the closer you can get first day and last day of flow, the better off we are with our data. Thank you. Lauren?
Can I ask a question?
Yeah.
Did I understand you to say earlier that you have a map of the Tucson area that shows on the map locations where observations are made on all these streams?
Yes, didn't you say that would be on the River Run Network website?
Yeah, I believe that Lauren actually, it was her response to Chris. I can send it one more time in the chat. So this is the link right here that will take you to the sites.
Oh, yeah. And it looks like we may have lost Lauren. If no one has any more questions, and since Cass and I are just assistants, maybe we'll wrap this up. And thank you all for, yes, Heather. Question, Heather?
I think Heather's just giving us a clap. Maybe.
Okay, oh, clap, thank you. Okay, well, thank you all for your attention and your participation. And thank you for supporting the River Run Network. Have a great week.
Yeah, thank you all for coming.
All right.
Thank you. I hope you have a good rest of the day. I'm sorry about my Wi-Fi issues. All right.